He is the first Israeli president to come to Turkey since 2008. But how far will Isaac Herzog's visit go in easing over a decade of tensions with Ankara? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberkaş. In a historic two-day visit, Israeli President Isaac Herzog met with his counterpart Recep Tayyib Erdogan in the Turkish capital. It was the first trip by an Israeli head of state to Turkey in 14 years and the latest step in the two countries' efforts to mend ties. After almost a decade of division, the two leaders said they are now ready for what they described as a new era in Turkish-Israeli relations. Erdogan stressed his willingness to revitalize political dialogue with Tel Aviv, as well as to increase collaboration within the energy sector, suggestions that were welcomed by Herzog, despite the two countries' continued disagreement over the rights of Palestinians. So, could this historic visit pave the way for improved Turkiye-Israel relations? And to discuss this, I'm joined now from Istanbul by Mithat Rende. He is a former Turkish ambassador. From Istanbul, Tarik Oguzlu. He is the Turkish Foreign Policy Institute academic advisor. And in West Jerusalem is Nimrod Goren. He is the president of Mitvim, the Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policies. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk, and thank you very much for joining me. So, Nimrod, Israel's Herzog has become the first Israeli leader to meet Erdogan since 2008 as the two countries seek a rapprochement. Talk to us about the significance and timing of this visit.
It is a very significant visit. The pictures that we saw yesterday from Ankara were so different from what we used to see in Israel-Turkey relations over the previous decade. It was a decade with a lot of tensions, with a lot of negative rhetoric, and all of a sudden we see the warmth, the good reception, the positive messaging, the genuine interest in starting a new chapter, a new era in relationship, talking about all kinds of issues in which both countries can cooperate, and doing so in a very public and positive manner. I think this was reflected at the meeting yesterday, at briefings that the president gave to the Israeli media afterwards, and in the way this whole visit is being perceived within the Israeli public and the policy elite.
So, Mithat, as a former ambassador, what's your take on that visit?
Well, I think it's a very important visit. In fact, the two countries have deep-rooted relations, and they are both neighbors on the Mediterranean. Although the relations, the Turkish-Israeli relations have experienced many ups and downs in the past, now it's comforting to see that the two leaders have decided to open a new page, and it's very important that this normalization process should be regarded as a process with several phases. But at least we should be able to focus on a positive agenda. Both sides should be able to set a new agenda and put their relations on a good positive track, and focus on trade, tourism, on energy issues, agriculture, health, defense industries, water management, and climate change.
So, Tarik, the Israeli presidency is largely a ceremonial role, but we know that Mr. Herzog coordinated his visit both with the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister for months. What does this mean when it comes to the two countries' willingness to restore diplomatic ties?
I think it's quite important that we see this visit taking place actually in the first instance. In the past, when Benjamin Netanyahu was the Prime Minister of Israel, the chemistry between Turkish and Israeli leaders were not that much good actually. So Erdogan and Netanyahu relationship was very frigid and very frozen actually. Bennett and Lapid duo, supported by Herzog in the Israeli presidency, seems to have cultivated a very positive image of Turkish. President himself, the two sides exchange phone calls in the past, as far as I remember. And this close coordination among the highest decision makers in Israel shows that there is a state logic nudging Israel much closer to Turkey in these days. So I think it's quite important. It's quite important.
So, Nimrod, how much of this normalization effort rides in the change of government in Israel, and how has Herzog's visit reverberated in Israel so far?
So the signals coming from Turkey about an interest in improving relationship, I think, began to come before this government came into office, already towards the end of the year 2020. I must say that there was skepticism in Israel initially about the serious of intentions. There was a lack of trust, especially when Netanyahu was still prime minister. The new government was willing to give it a chance, but in a very cautious and gradual manner. We saw Herzog and Erdogan speaking on the phone for the first time after Herzog being elected as president back in June. Since then, there was more channels of communication opening up between Bennett and Erdogan, between Lapid and his Turkish counterpart. Mutual trust was gradually being restored. Some crisis was resolved very positively with the arrest of the Israeli couple in Istanbul. So all of this created a positive atmosphere that enabled the Israeli policymakers to understand that there is something more genuine here, something that could be more sustainable, could be more meaningful, and therefore while it's going slow and gradual, it's moving forward and is being perceived in Israel overall in a positive manner.
Mithat, could you talk to us about the main drivers of this normalization effort? How have COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the latest crisis in Ukraine, pushed the both countries as well as the regional countries to mend ties?
I think in addition to the pandemic, also the change in the U.S. policy towards the Middle East also contributed to the desire to normalize as soon as possible. And I think Turkey has made a reassessment of the situation in the Middle East, and then the Turkish leadership decided to pay more effort, to spend more effort to normalize. And a case in point is the relationship between Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. With respect to the Israeli-Turkish relations, of course, we should also keep in mind that despite the ups and downs and the harsh rhetoric between the leaders, relations between the two people, the Israeli and Turkish people, remained friendly and strong, and trade was not that adversely affected. So I agree with you that, of course, the pandemic and also the recent devastation of Ukraine and the humanitarian disaster which is unfolding, of course, probably encouraged also the two countries to get together, join forces, and see if they can engage in more meaningful cooperation. And maybe they could also contribute to the energy security of Europe together if they can, if they can realize certain projects.
So, Tarik, how would disagreements over, for example, Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories and Ankara's relations with different Palestinian factions play out? What would be the roadmap here?
Actually, this Palestinian issue, Turkey's contribution to Hamas, Turkey's adoption of a kind of Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated approach to Israel will no longer shape the way of Turkish-Israeli relationship in the years to come. But because more than that, the two countries appear to shape some common strategic interests. The first interest they share in common is to make sure that Ukraine and Russia find a diplomatic solution to this latest crisis in Ukraine. And the second common interest they share is that in the absence of the American commitment to Middle Eastern politics, these two countries come together to improve their relationship, to find somehow everlasting, long-lasting solutions to regional problems. I think it wouldn't be an overestimation to say that in the years to come, we might be experiencing a comeback to the 1990s when the US, when the Turkey and Israel used to have a very good relationship among each other, which many analysts of Turkish foreign policy described back then the golden age of Turkey-Israel relationship. Maybe it is not that much easier to achieve that stage, but I think the two countries are already on the track to establish a much more strategic and pragmatic relationship, leaving aside the kind of thorny issues that might hinder the emergence of a kind of cooperative atmosphere, which certainly includes this Hamas problem and Turkey's traditional support to Muslim Brotherhood.
So, Nimrod, could economic relations be expanded further despite their political and ideological differences? What's your take on that? What should be the roadmap?
Yeah. So first, the economic relation between the countries was developing even when the political relations were not that good. It was one of the interesting characteristics of the Israel-Turkey relations, the fact that these relationships are very resilient. They have been in place since 1949 continuously with a lot of ups and downs, but never stopped. So even when there was a crisis, economy moved further. There were economic issues in which cooperation could not have been materialized until the political relationship and cooperation has been making progress. The energy issue has been mentioned before. There are differences on how Israel and Turkey may want to cooperate on energy issues, whether on natural gas or maybe on renewables, but in essence, both countries are looking for cooperation in the Mediterranean arena in as much as an inclusive way as possible. So trade volume could go up, more investment can be in place, tourism could increase. All of that will definitely increase the economic tangible benefits that this relationship will bring to the people. But I think the goal will be to expand beyond that, to look at a more regional setting. We see Turkey and the UAE improving their relationship. Could that be tied into Israel-UAE relationship? Could all kind of new triangular cooperations be set in place? If so, I think it will open new horizons for the relationship to develop.
Picking up on that, Mithat, what would fully restore ties between Turkey and Israel mean for Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates? And could these efforts expand so as to cover maybe in the near future Egypt and Syria?
What we need is to restore confidence, because there is a confidence gap. Let's face it, and it might take time. But consistent policies and efforts on both sides could reestablish the confidence which is missing at this point. Both sides, I think, they are aware that as regards certain regional issues and the Palestinian issues, they are not on the same page. Yeah. But of course, as Tarik Bey said, these thorny and complex issues could be dealt with, and both sides could try to bridge their differences with respect to regional issues like Syria, Libya, Eastern Mediterranean, and many other regional issues. But as regards to the Palestinian issues, of course, it is the expectation of the international community and Turkey. The two-state solution is the expectation of Turkey, and also yesterday the President Erdogan in his statement also mentioned the status of Jerusalem, and also the settlement issues and so on. These are complex issues, but of course they can be dealt with after a full restoration of confidence and normalization of relations are there.
So, Tarik, what should be the primary confidence-building measures? I mean, what would be the next step to overcome their differences, and how deep does the mistrust run between the two countries?
I think there are some structural problems that might stymie the Turkish-Israeli relationship from becoming a thorny relationship to a kind of a much more cooperative relationship. But let's face the reality as it exists today. These two countries share real strategic commonalities among each other. I am sure that in the following years, in the following months, high-level visits will take place between the two countries. We should not forget the fact that neither Israel nor Turkey is happy to see that relations between Ukraine and Russia deteriorates further and further, and maybe culminating in a kind of new Cold War era tension between NATO and Russia. None of them would like to see somehow themselves sandwiched between their two partners and allies. Both Turkey and Israel would have good relations with Ukraine and Russia, and they are trying to do their best to make sure that the parties come to a kind of diplomatic solution. Imagine that today in Antalya, the Turkish authorities are bringing together Ukrainian and Russian authorities, and I think Israel also supports such kind of initiatives from the background. This might cause the two countries to find further venues for developing a much more diplomatic, cooperative relationship in the years to come.
So, Nimrod, what would you like to say? What kind of a role could Turkey and Israel play amid the Russian aggression in Ukraine? And what is Israel's position in this crisis?
What we saw yesterday in the Israel-Turkey relationship is the power of diplomacy, and how countries that have been at odds for some time could overcome that and start a new chapter. And that's an example that I think Israel and Turkey can project to other actors. I think to see Israel trying to mediate in a conflict of others is a rather new component in our foreign policy. I know that Turkey previously put an emphasis on mediation between other countries. For Israel, it's new. So that's a new common denominator about how Israel and Turkey see their place in the region, in the world. I think it's countries that can contribute quite a lot on the multiple area of global agendas. Climate was mentioned before, conflicts are mentioned now. And I think once this mutual trust is being restored, once the coordination channels are being opened up again, I think Israel and Turkey can do quite a lot for the region, but also for each other. We mentioned the Israeli-Palestinian issue, by the way, before. I think Turkey could contribute to Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking. It could help Israel foster the power of the Palestinian Authority over Hamas, and hopefully the two-state solution will become nearer also through that.
So, Mithat, President Erdogan has said Herzog's visit will herald a new era, that the two countries could cooperate and work to carry the Israeli gas to Turkey and then to Europe. This was an idea that first discussed, if I'm not mistaken, like 20 years ago. What are the prospects of pumping an Israeli gas to Turkey and then to Southern Europe? Is this a far-fetched goal for the time being?
It's not far-fetched. In fact, let's remember that yesterday, I think the European Union decided to reduce, with a plan which was introduced, decided to reduce its dependence on Russian gas by 2/3. So that means it means that they have to buy 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas from other sources. And this is why it became all the more important that the Israeli gas should be monetized. And according to experts, the best and the most viable and economically feasible option among many options is the Leviathan, the Israeli Turkey Iskenderun pipeline project, because it's only as regards the cost, it's only 1/5 of the East Med. And the East Med, which was initially promoted by Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration, it's not supported by the United States anymore, and also it's not economically feasible nor environmentally sustainable. So now it is the time, I think, given the situation in Europe and the energy crisis which is unfolding, I think it is the time for Turkey and Israel to join forces and seek the support of the United States also, to see if the East Med gas could be monetized, could be also sent to Europe via Turkey through the Turkish national grid or through the famous TAP project. So I think it is the time to work on it, but it might take more efforts and time and also a good expertise. We need to work on it, and maybe not only the Israeli gas could maybe also part of Egyptian gas, and in the future the Lebanese gas, and why not maybe the Greek Cypriots gas?
But Mithat, aren't we running out of time with soaring prices and the escalation of the Russian aggression in Ukraine?
Well, I think it's the first most important duty is to stop the war, and I think both countries they enjoy, as Nimrod rightly said, that they enjoy very good, excellent relations with both countries, Ukraine and Russia, and this is why, in fact, and they remained quite neutral so far. They are trying to contribute to peace and therefore, I think both of them they can work together to establish peace and to avoid further escalation of the war, because it is a huge it is devastating. It's it's devastating, a huge country, and it is not acceptable at all during the at this point in time in Europe.
So, Tarik, now that the Mid-East pipeline project has been called off, what's next in the region? Could the Israeli gas be a game changer in Eastern Mediterranean amid this crisis?
I think now we are on the threshold of a kind of new development in the region. For the first time in recent years, the countries of the region might really come together as part of this gas cooperation business to forge much more cooperative relations among each other. They have all seen that neither the United States, nor Russia, nor China, the external great powers, could really produce or contribute to regional prosperity and security. The countries need to take the reins into their hands and come together to find common solutions to their problems. I think this latest Turkish-Israeli rapprochement might also pave the way for much better relationship between Turkey and Greece.
Yes.
Just because Turkey is embarked on a kind of rapprochement with United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Israel, now it is also included. This might open the way for much closer relationship between Turkey and Greece. I am of the view that this gas cooperation initiative might bring the countries of the region much closer to each other, because geopolitical reasoning, geoeconomic reasoning should be left aside, and pure intra-regional cooperation should be put at the center of their interaction. This latest Turkish-Israeli relationship might set the stage for such kind of a new understanding in regional politics, because they cannot rely on the good intentions of Russians, Americans, and Chinese. They should leave aside great powers for some time and focus their own internal capacity to forge much more inter-regional cooperation. And this, Turkish-Israeli relationship might set the stage for such kind of an outcome in the years to come.
But
let's see.
Yes, Nimrod, why do you think Israeli President Herzog felt the need to assure Greece, the Greek Cypriot sector, and Egypt that mending fences with Turkey would not negatively impact the excellent relationship they have? Why do you think he needed to say that?
We saw that happening also in 2016 when Israel-Turkey reconciled following the Marmara incident. At the time, there was also a wish by Israel to make sure that this new relationship with Turkey will not come at the expense of the other important relationship that Israel has built over the last decade with Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt. So I think the same messaging came here. Again, a messaging that Israel could play a win-win role within the Eastern Mediterranean, that it's not cooperating with one side against the other. And like was mentioned before, perhaps now we are at the beginning of an era that can look at more inclusive mechanisms in the Mediterranean. So when we talk beyond natural gas, we remember President Herzog just a few weeks ago came out with a vision about a renewable Middle East, about new regional structures in the Mediterranean looking at climate change. I think that's where we should begin, and that's how we can start framing inclusive debates on energy and other issues in the region. Of course, Israel, Turkey, and Egypt could be an interesting triangle to begin this process through, but also if Turkey-Greece relationship will be improving, as mentioned before, that will be very helpful indeed.
So, Mithat, now that the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis will be visiting Turkey soon, I mean, what's your expectation of that visit, and what do you make of this diplomatic flurry?
Well, let me pick the word used by Nimrod first. Inclusiveness. It's very important in the Eastern Mediterranean, because any platform should not be used to isolate any country in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's our common sea, and peace and stability, security is of importance for the prosperity of our people. And for the next generations. Now we are faced with common challenges, great challenges, such as the climate change and expected extreme heat waves. These heat waves and the climate crisis will hit the whole region. And this is why we need to join forces. We need to get together, not to isolate any country. And here, of course, Greece, Prime Minister Mitsotakis' visit is quite important. At this point, because then they will be able to also coordinate their actions, their activities. It's very important for the improvement of relations between two countries, and also for the East Med. So I agree with other friends and speakers that what we need is to join forces and to see if we can also support each other's economies in the field of tourism, for example. There is a huge capacity in Turkey and Israel, and also in Greece. So we should stop fighting. We should stop the harsh rhetoric, as I said earlier, and try to mend fences, and try to find a common ground and common denominators where we can gather together and see if we can avoid, for example, the region to continue to become a major playground for major powers, for superpowers. So it should not be a playground for petty economic and other interests of the major powers.
So, Tarik, what would you like to say? Can all these countries join hands?
I am that much actually optimistic about this possibility because this upcoming Greek Cypriot, Greek Prime Minister visits to Ankara seems to be quite revolutionary in the context of Turkish-Greek relationships. And I also sense that the Greek administration, the Greek establishment doesn't want to perceive this ongoing rapprochement between Turkey and Israel from a strategic perspective, in the sense that Turkey and Israel are coming together to sideline Greek and Greek Cypriots. Neither Turkey nor Israel is giving such kind of a message to outsiders. But I think the Greek sides will come to the conclusion that automatically they will come to the conclusion that they have to also include, they have to find a way to include Turkey in this regional cooperation process, and Turkish-Israeli relationship might help Ankara and Athens establish a much more cordial understanding among each other.
All right, Tarik, Mithat, and Nimrod, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.